Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is my Mars Hero Guide as voted for you guys for the 55,000 YouTube subscribers. So just keep in mind, this is a thank you to all of you guys who are subscribing to the YouTube channel. And if you haven't already subscribed and you want more hero guides, I do one every 5,000. So please, hit that subscribe button. So today we're going to talk about Mars. Mars is one of my favorite offlaners. In the current patch 7.27, he is the strongest offlaner.
Banana slam jam.
As you can see from my recent history, I may have struggled in the last two games, but prior to that, I had quite the streak with him, and it doesn't actually feel hard to pull off. Mars, what makes him such a good hero when he's good, we're going to talk about this as something that's a long-lasting guide, something where if he maybe isn't so meta, then we'll have to ask ourselves why. But what makes Mars so good is that as a laner, he has two ways to secure range creeps. He has one from long distance, the spear, and the other, the God's Rebuke, that's on a super low cooldown, super low mana cost, and also not only does it secure range creeps, but oftentimes it allows you to hit the opponent with it as well. And based on the current numbers, since it's bonus damage of 35 to heroes, and Mars with items usually hits for about 60, this is 150 physical damage approximately, damage nuke, that slows for 65 mana, that also can be used to reliably secure range creeps. So overall, he's just one of the strongest laners in the game. And really the only time he can't lane all that well is when he's not able to actually stand his ground. Heroes that make it so he can't stand his ground are carries that output a lot of damage with passives early on, something like a Slark potentially, something like an Ursa potentially, or supports like Witch Doctor with Maledict, or supports like Tusk with his tag team. These heroes represent a lot of damage if Mars stays too long, and it may be a bit more difficult for him to lane heads up. And these are the type of things you have to think about when you're picking Mars, because he's not exactly straightforward with this. I don't have a way to go about it other than to tell you you're either allowed to sit in the creep wave and threaten both of your spells while you go for every single CS, or you're not. In the lanes where you're able to do that, you pretty much get absolute free farm, complete control of the lane. And lanes where you're not able to do that, usually you can still get decent CS. And that's what makes the hero, in my opinion, so reliable. The only patch that he was bad ever since his release, or at least the time period where he was bad, was immediately following the nerf to mana cost on his spear, used to be 100, as well as continuous nerfs to his W over time, which gave it, it used to be 10 or 15 less mana. What happened was he basically ran out of mana. He never ever had enough mana in order to cast his spells. Prior, when he came out on release, he was able to cast his spells, and now, since they gave him base intelligence and base mana regen, he's now once again able to cast his spells. So, TLDR, Mars' kit innately is one of the best kits in the entire game. He has two spells that make him an incredibly strong laner. In any lane where you don't necessarily have kill threat, but the enemy team will be right-clicking you a lot, his Bulwark is incredibly potent. It's a one-point wonder. I don't think you ever put more than 1 point in it until your other two skills are maxed, just looking at the scaling of the spell. The big thing to understand about this spell, if you do the math, is that if you're getting right-clicked from the front, so it's similar to Bristleback, but obviously the opposite. If you're getting right-clicked from the front, those spells, say a spell that was supposed to hit you for 100, it now hits you for 60. That means that for every 3 hits that would have done 300, it takes them 5 hits to do that much damage. So what that effectively means is you have 66% more HP against right clicks every time you level Bulwark. The level 1 Bulwark, right? So in lanes where you're against like a Drow, or maybe a Morphling, or maybe a Lifestealer, these heroes that just right-click you a lot, Bulwark can be incredibly good, even level 2, as early as level 2, as just a way to say, okay, I previously didn't think I could stand in the lane, but now BSJ told me Mars' like #1 kit for winning the lane is being able to stand on top of the creep wave. I'm going to try leveling this against these heavy right-click heroes. And those are the lanes that it can make a huge difference. Personally, I love him against sustaining supports. Ones that maybe look to harass you every now and then, but have really no kill threat on you. These are the ones I love to pick him against, in tandem with carries that are relatively passive. Carries with limited damage output in the laning stage. Carries that I really like him against are stuff like PA, Faceless Void. I like him against Anti-Mage, actually. I like him against Jug in lane, but in game it gets a bit hard. All the illusion heroes he feels really good in lane against, but because Spear can only hit one actual target, he tends to struggle against some of them later, but he's very good at laning against them because of his God's Rebuke. Any heroes that he naturally kills at level 6, he doesn't mind laning against. Drow is a bit hard because she right-clicks you a lot. As long as you have a 4-position hero that can help you kill her, that lane's not that bad. Hero like Anti-Mage, you do run out of mana, but you actually can just buy physical damage items and right-click them back. Heroes like Morphling, you're really good against early, but as he gets levels, it becomes harder and harder to lane against him. Notice what I'm saying about these lane matchups, though. None of them are perfect, but none of them are atrocious. A lot of it has to do with the supports. If I have a support like Rubik or Lina, or even like a hard committing support like Tusk, I either win the harass trade or we can absolutely just kill them off cooldown. If I have more of like a weak 4, when I say weak, I think of something like an Earth Spirit that necessarily comes online later, that more so gives me the disable rather than the damage. Mars is a lot more about the disable early than he is the damage. So I think he's really powerful in lane with supports that specifically capitalize on his disable by outputting a lot of damage. Mirana and Lina would probably be the two that stand out the most to me. I think Mars Lina is probably one of the most powerful dual off lanes in the entire game. Something like Mars Willow or Mars Phoenix is a much better combo in the game because he synergizes so well with their ults. The Fear from Willow in the game is one of the most powerful synergies between a support and a core because you arena and then they get feared and they get ran into the arena. It works with SF ulti as well as Lone Druid. All these are actually powerful Mars synergies. And then obviously for the egg, your arena is nice for protecting the egg. So that's kind of like a TLDR of his laning stage and when I look to pick him. His major weaknesses, well right now nothing. But the heroes he struggles against really are the ones that are either hard to kill with arena, unreliable spear targets. The spirits are pretty tough. Any carry with innate mobility that can get them past arena, as well as like Lifestealer Jug, heroes that have magic immunity built into their kit. These heroes can be super annoying. If there's too many of them on the opponent team, then the game can get a bit tough to be the one that initiates. A lot of time people misunderstand Mars as the primary initiator. There's a lot of games where I actually prefer him to be the secondary initiator, where if they pick all these heroes, they pick Lifestealer safe lane, and they pick Ember Spirit mid. It's very hard for Mars to ever initiate onto these heroes. With that being said, I want you to basically rethink to yourself how when you have a Mars on your team, and also when you're playing Mars, whether or not you're going first or second. It has to be a target that you can reliably spear, or at least somewhat reliably spear. You see them, maybe you get the God's Rebuke to slow them, then you spear them into the arena or spear them into a tree, and go from there. But heroes like Ember and Void Spirit and Puck, these heroes are very hard to spear. And even illusion heroes, you're also going to have a hard time spearing them because it only hits one illusion into the wall. Other heroes like Timbersaw that you don't naturally solo kill, so they're not threatened by you, but they also threaten you in the early to mid game. Clockwork can be kind of annoying. Any constant disables, Mars doesn't mind usually like a volley of disables, meaning like an initial burst of disables, but he doesn't want to get continuously disabled or be like locked down in an area. He wants to be able to plop down his arena and be like, I am a god, literally, because he is a god. Ancient Apparition, or just high magic burst can be super annoying for Mars, since his main source of survivability is bulwark, which is only physical damage. His main source of survivability does not help him against heavy magic burst. So heroes like Ancient Apparition can be super annoying, as well as just any combos that say, like Snapfire Void, for instance. That could be really annoying. Tusk, even though it's physical damage from Tusk, it's just like an overwhelming amount of damage that Mars could never tank through. Also has an ability that dodges your spear with the snowball. The heroes I love picking Mars against specifically are actually a lot of offlaners. Offlaners that can't teamfight into Mars, but rely on team fighting. I think Tide has a really hard time fighting into Mars. I think Axe has a really hard time fighting into Mars. I think Legion has a really hard time fighting into Mars. And I also think even heroes like Magnus have a really hard time fighting into Mars. Underlord as well. It's like these heroes that are bulky. They want to control an area. They want to be initiating. They want to be scary. And Mars just plops down his arena, spears them into it, and they usually die full to 0, even if they're super tanky, because Mars arena combo just does so much damage. Heroes that make it very difficult from the offlane for Mars to play can potentially be like a Doom. Something like Night Stalker, I've noticed, is actually one of the worst matchups, because he can fly over your arena, as well as the fact that you have to buy a BKB to ever be reliably blink spearing. Tiny can be kind of annoying just because of all the interrupts from his Avalanche Toss combo and also the Magic Burst that I talked about, same idea behind AA. But I love picking him against like any mid laners that are like SFs or Vipers or, Razors or Necros. These heroes that are pretty immobile until they get a lot of items, if for SF's case maybe. But like they're just sitting spear targets. I want to be able to think about Mars as I walk to a lane in the early to mid game. I plop down an arena and that guy's going to die. It sets up tower pushes. It sets up tower threat. And a lot about what Mars does is being a threat. It's all in lane as well as in game. You want your volley of skills to just say, wow, we can't handle this guy with one hero. We can't go for this casual CS in lane. We can't defend this tower with one hero. We need to bring everybody, or 2 or 3 heroes. And that's the power of Mars. You can force a lot of reactions just by being a threat on the map, but you also represent a lot of wave clear. So you can kind of pick and choose your fights very carefully. So I know I just rattled off a lot about Mars. I've learned a lot about him recently, and we're going to go into the nitty gritty of exactly what I think about his skills and levels and such. So,
Gods and men alike,
Spear
tremble!
Scales pretty damn well. Goes up in damage, cast range, and stun duration. Almost every game I default to maxing his Spear first. It ends up one-shotting range creeps, which is very useful on any hero, and also it's just your best kill tool. So generally it's your best farming tool, and it's your best kill tool. And on the other hand, though, in certain lanes where I talked about against like a PL, where your Spear's not nearly as good, I might be more inclined to go for God's Rebuke. Spear's more about I'm either having a rough lane, so I'm looking to team fight, or just kind of sit back and spear the range creep. I can max that out. Or God's Rebuke is more like I own this lane, I dare you to walk up, and on a 10-second cooldown, I'm going to hit you for like 300 damage. That's like basically the 2 ways that Mars can play in the early to mid game. Basically, the more aggressive you think you can be, the more points you put in Rebuke. The more team fighty, less laning you're doing, the more you put into Spear. And that value point in Bulwark, as we talked about earlier on in the video, if you feel like you're getting right-clicked a lot in the lane, you can put that 1 point into it. So, with that being said, you level Arena at every single level. At level 10, if you think you're going to need to do a lot of physical damage this game, I take the 15 damage talent, but I'd say 90% of the time I'm taking the 3-second Spear cooldown. At level 15, I pretty much ask myself, am I playing the tank build or am I playing the utility build? And that is something we'll discuss shortly. But if I'm doing the tank build, it's the armor. If I'm more about the utility, it's the 20 movement speed. At level 20, it comes down to how reliable it is to spear their course. The Spear of Mars damage is really nice for clearing creep waves, especially if there's a wave of racks down, because it allows your Spear plus W to instantly clear the wave. I'd say you want the Mars stun if it's possible, but if you're against illusion heroes or a lot of Mantas or just like spirits that are hard to spear, and yes, you still need to use your Spear, but it may not be as potent as it is in other games, then I would take the spear damage. At level 25, kind of depends. Am I the physical damage solo carry of the game that you saw in my 3K MMR Smurf game? Or am I the guy that's meant to be the be-all, end-all team fighter? If the answer is the be-all, end-all team fighter, you take the arena HP. If you're the physical damage dealer, you take the rebuke for 65% crit. Also, if you have an AGS, you're probably more likely to take the level 25 talent. There's really 2 builds for Mars, right? We'll go to some wins real quick. So we can use wins as an example. There's really 2 builds for Mars. So in this game, I'm against Oracle Bounty Hunter. And if you watch the lane, I have a 4-position Pudge. So he's going to be roaming a lot. And this is the lane where I'm going to be taking a lot of random damage. From Bounty Hunter walking up and just using his passive, it was a carry Bounty Hunter, or just an Oracle in general nuking me a lot, right? So in these type of lanes, where you're not exactly trying to win the lane, against these lane-dominating safe laners, such as Bounty Hunter, where they capitalize on a feeding offlaner, then I just go for the sustain, don't get fucked build, which usually involves Tranquils. And if I'm having a really bad game, I'll maybe default to a bunch of Clarities or a Bottle. If I'm having a really good game, meaning like, yeah, I know I need to sustain in this lane, but I'm getting a lot of CS, which in this case it was, I go for the Soul Ring as my mana item. So you obviously need sustain on every hero, but for Mars specifically, if he's on the aggressive all the time, you don't need nearly as much sustain, and you eventually can look to build a Vlad's. But if you're more so on the defensive and you're just looking to get what you can get out of the lane, notice how, I have pretty solid net worth, even though I am not getting any kills. I'm just chucking out some spears, and I'm much more of a roamer because I don't want to be in a lane against a Bounty Hunter. I go for this build, right? Tranquil Soul Ring into the Yules or the Blink. If I was having a better game, I usually go for the Yules because it gives me mana to farm with. And if I'm having a weaker game, I would have gone for the Blink first because that's more of like, I can't really farm all that much. I'm just trying to be a good team fighter. And this is like the utility Mars build, in my opinion. Because Yules naturally sets up your spear. You Blink Yules somebody or just Yules and then spear them against targets that are previously hard to spear. You can actually perfectly land it on pretty much every target in the game as long as they don't have BKB, I believe. So like any hero with a mobility spell, you can hit them with the spear. Usually that's followed up by either a Vlad's for the utility or like a BKB to just make yourself more of a team fighter. And then, so in this lane I'm against PA. And I look to be battling her a lot. I know she's going to do some damage to me, but I talked about how against a hero like PA who has limited damage output in the laning stage, I love to fight them back, and I love to man up, and I love to build right-click damage items and overall trading items. And you're going to see that approach here, right? I already have 2 kills this early on in the game, but I'm going for 1 because of the fact that it's PA with a lot of daggers. And then I go for the Bracer, one of the best trading items in the game right now. And then I just go straight phase boots, right? This is more of the, I want to dominate my lane. I plan to occupy this lane, control this lane, play this lane like a dead lane where if the opponent comes to it, they're going to die. And this is the way I like to play when I'm thinking about the game like that. If I was having notice how I had a really good start, so I went these items, but then I died a couple times. So instead of going for like these luxury aura farming items or like a soul ring, I just go straight for the blink, right? Because that's the, okay, I'm not having the best game. I need to be as impactful as possible. Let's go blink. And then at that point, I usually go BKB almost always after blink or Vlad's, like I showed in the other one. And if I had had a better start to this game, I would have gone for the Vlad's because it's like the luxury. I'm going to shove the lane. I'm going to sustain. I'm going to be powerful, set up for Roche, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so items to consider on Mars. We saw in my Smurf replay thing, I'd love for the YouTube editor to link that in here. We saw that Deso can be a potential damage item for the hero. I think Phase or Tranquils are going to be the boots you buy 95% of games. Occasionally Treads or just leaving it at brown boots. But for the most part, it's Phase or the Tranquils. And then I think Vlad's is the premier aura item. I'd say sometimes against Phoenix or Undying, these heroes, they have to hit their stuff like a certain amount of times. I'll consider drums. In this game, I didn't, but in other games, I know I've gone drums against Undying specifically, and I would consider them against Phoenix. I'd say Greaves or Pipe, these type of items, I very rarely go. I have to be desperate. I have to think that I can do every job that I want to do in the game in terms of being a lockdown hero, or I have somebody else that's going to initiate for me, and by buying Greaves, I'm going to be nearly unkillable, or my team can now sustain push in every way that they want to. And with Pipe, it has to be better than a BKB, which is usually very rare because Mars struggles against like AoE stuns and silences that prevent him from casting his stuff. And even though it protects you from the damage aspect, a lot of times you find yourself being tanky, but not actually doing anything other than being tanky. And a lot of good players will just ignore you at that point. So Mars, as long as he's casting his spells, I feel like he's one of the premier team fighters in the entire game. So even though aura items are nice, he's kind of similar to Slardar, where I would prioritize making sure he casts all of his spells more than I would prioritize making sure he has the auras that his team might want. Another item in the laning stage you can look to buy on Mars is Orb of Venom. It's an amazing item if you are controlling the lane. If I'm against like a Spectre or a PA, these heroes that don't really threaten me super early, it adds the extra slow to your God's Rebuke. And the beauty of the God's Rebuke when you're in an advantageous lane is you slow them with the damage, and then you're able to hit them because they're slowed. So it's like effectively more damage. So I love to buy Orb of Venom in lanes where I don't necessarily kill them with one volley of spells because it's some tanky, annoying hero like Spectre or like evasive hero like PA. But if I hit them enough, they'll die to the war of attrition. And Orb of Venom is super good for that. I never buy items like Blade Mail, really. Occasionally, maybe against like a Wind Ranger, I might buy it. But I would say the core items for Mars are really all I've mentioned. He doesn't really have other items that he likes to go. You're either a tanky boss that can't die, or you're a utility hero that's just trying to live and get his spells off. There's not much in between that. That's kind of the problem, right? When it comes to like versatility of item builds. The one damage item would be Deso. If you're ever supposed to do damage, Deso is the best item. The bonus damage synergizes really well with your God's Rebuke, as well as obviously the minus armor. It makes you one-shot creep waves, so it's also a farming item. Ag Scepter is pretty much a 10th item, or 7th item. Still reminiscing from my 2-hour Leshrac game yesterday. Yeah, so Ags is pretty much a luxury item that you usually can't afford to get. You usually either need a tank ability item or like a mana item or something like that. Before you need that item. So even though the Ags could be really nice, it's usually not an item you have the luxury to buy. I consider items like Sheepstick or Abyssal Blade in the super late game in order to set up my spear. I've done that before, where as the game goes really far on, I want to be able to solo kill people or threaten to initiate onto them, and the best way to do that late game is having a setup or a stun that then sets up your spear, which Abyssal Blade or Scythe of Ice could work. You can consider an item like Radiance against PL specifically, or maybe other illusion heroes, but it's like mainly you don't trust your teammates or you have absolutely no PL counter, and you can go an item like that. I would say that's like a 1% of games, maybe, but it's honestly reasonable if you're against illusion heroes, because in lower brackets, I talk about how you want to itemize against the win condition of the opponent, because you can't really trust your teammates to do it. Unless one of your teammates is proving to you that they already are. So if you're against a PL as an offlaner like Mars, who naturally struggles very much against illusion heroes as the game goes on, then you can absolutely look to buy items like Radiance and Ashivas. In a lane where I'm playing much more defensive, I love the Windlace. Lanes where I'm pretty much trying to prevent the opponent from hitting me at all. This applies to a lot of offlaners, but in this case, Mars, it also applies. And I can play this more dodge-heavy game with the Bounty Hunter, where I'm just trying to prevent him from using his W to get good trades with me. And anytime my forward position's being aggressive, or anytime the other two heroes are grouped up, I'm very willing to use my W to harass, or, aid my forward position in being aggressive. And notice the defensive creep aggro, right? I'm just trying to stay away from the carry. Mars is very polarized. He either wants to be up in the face of the carry, or he wants to be very far away from the carry, not giving them the trades that they want. So in this case, for all the reasons I talked about, with Bounty Hunter, he doesn't really out flash farm. I don't really need to pressure him. I just need to make sure he doesn't destroy me, because that's the type of laner he is, right? So notice I've been playing for my own game, even though I'm not really doing the best in terms of denies and all that kind of stuff. I am pretty much getting every CS for myself. And notice how much damage I've already taken, even though I'm playing incredibly evasive. And that's the idea behind these Tranquils. I don't really need to be stronger to bully this bounty hunter. I just need to keep saving gold when it comes to sustain. Almost every lane, I'm barely ever using spear. Spear is like I'm committing for the kill, or I absolutely need this to get this guy off of me such that I can live. Spear just costs so much mana in comparison to God's Rebuke. And notice how with the mana regen that he has innately, I pretty much have all I want to be able to just spam God's Rebuke for last hits. And that's all I've been doing, right, in a defensive lane. And even though I'm playing this kind of scared in terms of defensiveness, I'm able to basically get every CS. And the beauty of Mars is as long as you're getting what you want, you're happy. And so against certain laners like Bounty Hunter, or even like a Lifestealer, for instance, that just want to right-click you, it may be really nice to go these types of builds where you get that early win lace. The difference is, a lot of times for me, is how the matchup scales. So for Bounty Hunter, I don't really care about pressuring him. He's a carry that's going to naturally rotate. But if it's something, you know, like a Spectre that I'm inclined to want to pressure, in those cases, I'm going to buy items that try to make me as strong in lane as possible. I'm going to buy the double bracer and the phase boots as opposed to these tranquils because I'm looking to pressure. While if I buy the tranquils, it's saying this guy is looking to pressure me. He benefits from winning the lane. It's a lane winner, not a game winner, right? And there's a lot of carries you'll run into in any bracket that fit the lane winner, not game winner description. Clinks, Bounty Hunter, even a hero like Lifestealer could potentially be labeled that. Maybe a Huskar in your super low MMR games, whatever. Just think of it as, does that hero rely on just getting the farm they need, or are they a hero I want to pressure? Are they a hero that wants to shut me down, I guess is the better, are they? So notice how in this lane I approach it that way. And that's the way I start to think about the lane. So in this game, I was actually deliberating. And I was deliberating between, do I want to be the guy pressuring, or do I want to just try to get what I get? Since Witch Doctor is one of Mars's worst 5-position matchups, you almost always are going to lose the lane or have a rougher time when you're dealing with Witch Doctor, assuming the carry player picks a somewhat counter to your hero. So similar to the Bounty Hunter, I want to avoid getting hit by the Anti-Mage for obvious reasons. So I go for the Wind Lace to make myself faster than he is. And against Witch Doctor, I almost always buy a Fairy Fire because of Maledict. It effectively saves me more health based on the way Maledict works. And the thing about this lane, though, that you're going to see, as opposed to going for the Tranquils, which is like a I Survive build, I'm going to go for the, even though I'm playing passively build, eventually look to trade with this guy. And the reason I think that is, that I can best explain it to you, was in the Bounty Hunter Oracle lane, Bounty Hunter is the hero I'm building around, because he's the one that threatens me. He's the one that's really strong in lane against me. And in this lane, it's Witch Doctor. And the beauty of it is, at least at high MMRs, the supports eventually leave. Eventually, if I'm an offlaner and I'm forcing 2 heroes in my lane when I'm by myself the entire time, that's like actually me doing my job. So if you're like forcing a 1v2 the entire game, that's perfectly fine with me. Excuse me. So assuming he eventually leaves, I need to think, once he leaves, what items can I buy that actually allow me to trade with Anti-Mage effectively? And so what we're going to see with my item build is exactly what I envision. And we'll show you how that plays out. So here I'm just going to go base, because I'd rather just give my support a bit of XP and not spend too much gold on all the regen. This is a lane that I'm looking to survive and then eventually pressure later. With a hero like PA, I'm looking to pressure at all moments because there's really no point where she threatens me. But with Anti-Mage and Witch Doctor, they threaten me super early, right? So I'm in this like survival mode and then pressure mode. And remember how I talked about with Mars' laning stage? He is pretty much one or the other. It's either you're shitting on them or they're shitting on you. And the beauty of it is, it's not something that's like set in stone for the entire laning stage. It can transition based on factors I talked about. The support leaving, maybe you scale better with levels, maybe you in your 4 position win the lane if you have kill potential, and you only have kill potential once you get to a certain level. The point is that I look for these windows on Mars that I'm talking to you about, right? So in this lane, passive early, aggressive later. So we're going to fast forward to get to that moment in the game where I show you. So a lot of viewers, to be clear, one of Mars's most luxurious items is Soul Ring, okay? A lot of viewers were watching this game and they say, BSJ, he's 9k and he doesn't even know to buy Soul Ring against Anti-Mage. So first and foremost, I leveled my God's Rebuke first, maxing it, because Anti-Mage has a physical damage, or a magical damage resistant passive, and I'm more so looking to win the trades with God's Rebuke. But not only that, but if I'm buying mangoes in order to use mana, I can't really utilize Spear because it's more than the 110 I get from a mango. The thing about Soul Ring is now that it doesn't give health regen anymore, it creates a problem for heroes like Mars where they can't sustain. So lanes where I'm willing to buy Soul Ring are lanes where I'm either going to go Vlad's pretty much immediately after, which eliminates that sustain problem, or the opponent just doesn't really threaten me at all. Or I have Tranquils, as you saw in the Bounty Hunter game. So in this lane, I want you to think that if I'm getting gone on, which is when I would want to Soul Ring Spear, it's going to be with Witch Doctor maledicting me, and then I'm going to Soul Ring. I don't know if you know how that ability works, but when I was doing this game live, there were a lot of very smart Twitch chatters telling me I should have bought a Soul Ring. It's a lane where I'm going to suffer from health and mana problems. If I'm going to suffer from health and mana problems, I can't go for a Soul Ring just yet. Because it creates it where I have all the mana in the world, but I don't have any health. So that's the issue I face here, is I can't go for the Soul Ring, which I would innately want to go for against Anti-Mage, and thus I'm in this situation where I'm forced to play with low mana, and opposed to the Soul Ring, my mana item is a Wand, which is good against Witch Doctor, because if I get maledicted, I then Wand myself, which is the similar idea to the Fairy Fire. And I'm actually going to look to just trade with physical right clicks and be manaless for the rest of the lane. I actually think it was a mistake that I win a second point and Spear in this lane. I should have just gone 1-3-1 so that I win the trades even harder with the right clicks. But notice how against Anti-Mage, I know he doesn't scale that well in terms of right clicking you. He's about the same level 5 as he is level 1 when it comes to right clicks. Like, he mana burns you level 1, he mana burns you level 5, he's the same hero. Mars, on the other hand, I'm getting a lot more damage on my W every time I level up. So I go for this items that say, I'm going to trade with you, buddy. And I'm actually bullying him away in lane. And that's why in this lane, I went for the phase boots as opposed to the tranquils. Because there's this point in the lane that I'm allowed to be strong. And I think there's a point where I can bully this guy. And I want to bully this guy because he's this hard carry where it's my job to stop his farm. And that's what we're really trying to emphasize, right? So this is the laning stage. This is the way I think about it. And it's super important that you try to think about it too. I could pull up all types of content on Mars, but I think a lot of his game is understanding that he's a super powerful laner and that just walking at buildings is incredibly potent. It's something that you should always be a looming threat on buildings. The idea is you want to make it so in the mid game, when I'm looking to rotate, I'm either creating a dead lane here, where I'm in this lane right now and I say, the carry can't walk back up unless he gets 2 heroes to gank me. Or, if that's not the best lane to do it because their carry is super survivable, I'll usually walk at the mid lane. And I'll just say, hey, if they don't bring 3 heroes here, then I'm going to naturally just threaten this guy away from his tower and we're going to kill the tower. You want to think about, if I walk somewhere on Mars, what's the opponent going to do about it? And that's the best way to look to rotate in the mid game. This game specifically, since I'm against an anti-mage, I'm always going to have mana issues. I pretty much have to get phase boots to survive the lane. And then I have to go for the Soul Ring eventually so that I don't have mana issues anymore. And that makes sense, right? I get past the laning stage with the phase boots, force out rotations to the bottom lane. And now that I have phase boots, I can look to maybe do something, right? I know I died there, but, you know, even players of my caliber, you know, we die sometimes. And these are the type of games where it's really frustrating. I see my other lanes losing, and I'm also trying to pressure this anti-mage. And as a Mars, if you're ahead and if you're behind, you look to do the same thing. If you're ahead, you're much less pressured to use Arena, but you're still having it as a threat. If you're behind, then you're pretty much looking, where can I use my Arena in the immediate future to try to get something done? That's pretty much how I approach Mars. Arena is one of the most broken spells in the game, and you should not be hesitant to throw it out, because the most significant downfall of using it incorrectly is its mana cost. It's 200 mana. But its cooldown is 90 seconds, something I think will be nerfed by the time a lot of you see this video. I think one of his issues as a hero is that his cooldown on his ult is just way too short in the early to mid game. So I would say when you're behind on Mars, which in this game we are, I'm pretty much always prioritizing the supports in team fights. That's pretty much what I'm doing. And you'll see here that when I go for this arena mid, I'm going to prioritize purely the supports. Because I want to just burst on whoever I can in the arena. That's the idea behind my hero. So in this case, I'm going to get the Witch Doctor. And notice how it's basically, even though it's not killing the Skywrath at the same time, they're sitting inside of an arena and they're effectively useless when they're in there. If I'm ahead, I look to think to myself, which core do I think is the most important to focus with my initial volley of spells? So like in this game, I would obviously be looking to focus Anti-Mage, but it's a bit tough since we have been behind most of this game, and Anti-Mage is #1 net worth. So every team fight, I look to go for the golden goose. You know, what's the perfect hero to initiate onto? And based on how far or behind I am, far ahead I am or behind I am, I'll prioritize a higher target. So if I'm behind, it'll be more likely a support. If I'm ahead, it'll be much more likely to be a core. Usually, my volley of spells is that I blink, arena, and then spear. Sometimes you have time to God's Rebuke. The problem is against heroes like Skywrath Mage or like Sand King with instant disables and silences, you often don't have time to arena, God's Rebuke, and spear. So that's a luxury. If you have the ability to use all three in that order, that's the perfect order. Something you can also do, I know the replay I did it in is too late, is that you can actually, I'll show you in a private lobby. That's actually the best way to do it. Is if you feel like you need to spear before arena, because you don't have time, to arena and then spear because they'll be able to react to it, is you can actually arena somebody after you've speared them. So what you can do is, I'll show you real quick. Level up. So we'll put an enemy.
Prepare for battle.
So what you can do is that, and then put the arena right on the edge, and they'll be taking damage from the arena as if it was a normal arena. And that's something you can look to do as well, which can be really cool, especially in like laning stage kills, where you don't necessarily want to commit the arena because you're not sure if you'll hit the spear, but you keep fishing for spears, and if you happen to hit one, you can use the arena as the damage on top of it. That's like a really nice little tidbit that you can do. That's why I don't use quick cast for Mars Arena, because I want to be able to see the exact outline of where I can lay it down. So another game where I went for like the scared build, when I say scared build, like the Tranquil Jules or the Brown Boots Jules, is a game where I first pick Mars, and if you look at the opponent lineup, if I go into the fight, high damage, high burst, high burst, high burst. There's like no item I can buy here unless I'm snowballing, which is a BKB, that allows me to survive these heroes. And I actually got camped 1v3. I had a bounty hunter, a Rubik, I think, that just left me alone. Oh yes, I specifically remember. He died twice and left me. A lot of offlaners can relate to this one. So my laning stage was a yikes, guys. Was a yikes. And the idea is that against these types of heroes, if I'm having a rough game, I just cannot survive with any amount of tanky items. Tanky items just don't do anything for me. So what do? I go for the Blink Yules, right? And eventually a BKB, because that does help me a lot against the supports. But the cool thing about Mars is you can learn for yourself. There's this critical threshold where you're either able to tank and just be a monster, and just you buy like Vlad's BKB AC, or like a Lotus or a Shiva's, these armor tank ability items. Usually you can't buy items like Halberd because you just don't have mana. And you'd also prioritize armor because of how well it synergizes with your strength gain as well as your bulwark passive. Or there's situations where no matter what you do, you just can't tank. In these games, I like to go the Yules. I even consider a Ghost Scepter, because the idea is I'm going to blink in, I'm going to go in, I want to cast all my spells, and I just need to not instantly kaplute. And if I'm able to be a man where I don't die at all to anything that hits me, I'm going to buy as bulky items as I possibly can. If I'm against lineups like the one you see here, I'm going to go much more for the damage evasion build and just be much more about utilizing my kit and then not instantly dying. That applies to a lot of offlaners, by the way, a mindset you can look to have. More so the team fighting offlaners, ones that use a high volley of spells and then they're done for the most part. The Sand Kings, the Mars. Slaughter Art does not fit that description. A lot of AoE team fighters, basically. You can utilize that mindset to think about team fighting. Something, we have not mentioned is that Mars in the past has sometimes been played mid. I think Mars can be rotated to mid. A lot of his gameplay I think, benefits from the side lanes because he doesn't rely on a bottle as much as other heroes. And I think he does have a lot of the descriptions of a mid laner. He wave clears, he potentially threatens towers, he scales pretty well. But for the most part, I feel like he's the same hero in the mid lane as he is in the off lane, which means if you can demote a hero and they can be the same hero in terms of priority of farm, I think I would prefer it in the other lane. So it's not that I don't think he can be a mid laner, but I do think he needs farm. So I think his sweet spot is 3, right? I don't love him as support. I don't love him as 4 or 5. But I also don't hate him as a mid. The big deal for me is that he just needs to have a decent lane. So if you want to swap up the lanes with somebody on your team because you got hard counter in the safe lane, or you just feel like playing some Mars mid because you know you'll get a good start and it'll give you some good practice on utilizing your abilities initially when you're trying to learn, then it's a perfectly fine role to play the hero. I just think he's more ideally an offlaner. So for utilizing the Bulwark active, it's a tough one. Something I haven't even mentioned in the video because I hardly ever do it. I honestly could be better at it. Something to note is when the enemy forts, you can utilize Bulwark in order to keep your creep wave alive. As long as you're able to tank the tower shots, you're tanking effectively like 4 tower shots of volley. You can use it for that. You can use it if you have like a Phoenix where they actually hit your Bulwark instead of the egg. I believe it's 70%. So a small tidbit that you may not notice if you don't read, a lot of people don't tend to read based on my experience, is that when you activate your Bulwark, ranged projectiles, attacks, 70% of them hit you instead of your teammates. And it's based on your teammates' proximity to you. I believe it's 700 range. I'm too lazy to look, but honestly, you can just Google it if you're confused. And the big deal about this is that I've saved my teammates a few times if they have a hard right-clicker, like Gyro, Drow, but Drow uses her E a lot to do the damage, so it's like Gyro, Weaver, Morphling, Arc Warden, Clinks. These type of heroes actually struggle really hard against Mars in the late game in terms of killing his teammates ever. So it's more so about protecting your teammates than it is about yourself. But occasionally you can retreat from fights or pushes by popping your E and then backing. It does make you slower. You see the 20% speed penalty. So it's just important that you realize, yes, it's nice, but a lot of the time, at least in my opinion, the movement speed slow puts you in a more jeopardized position than the amount of health you save from retreating with your E active. Your E is considered an activatable spell on Mars. So I actually think the #1 use for his E is blocking Rubik from stealing your spells. So a great habit you can get into when you are playing Mars against Rubik is to utilize your volley of spells and then immediately toggle your Bulwark, thus preventing him from getting any of your good spells. So that is something somebody in chat mentioned, and I think it's important to note. With that in mind, Mars is one of my favorite heroes. I love playing Mars. Maybe should have even said that at the start. Maybe I did say it at the start. But that's going to be my hero guide for Mars. If you guys like this, please like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of cool stuff that I might have already mentioned. And we're almost already to another 60,000 goal for our next hero guide. So stay tuned for the next one. And let me know what you guys think of this in the comments. Thanks, guys.